going to maximize. Good. Hello, everyone. It's good to have the opportunity to briefly share my research on Myanmar here today. Thanks, Edgar, for your hard work in pulling this whole special series together. You have done a great job connecting the academics and practitioners, policymakers together. I hope there will be more to come. And for today, my presentation will be based largely on a journal article that my PhD student Cassandra Priest and myself have recently published on European Journal of Development Research. Please feel free to email me or Edgar to get the hard copy if you do not have it already. And also for more of my IDRC research, funded research on gender equality, you can take a look at my website here. Are you able to see my website here? Edgar? Yes?
Yes.
There. Okay,
Yes.
So please check out. This is a write-up of all the work that we have been doing with Myanmar and our international team of scholars and MREF team, a local NGO in Yangon. We have documented all the research and activities that we've been doing, survey and focus group discussion. Right, now back to my presentation. So just a brief overview of the pictures here. These are some of the pictures taken based on the interviews with local women leaders in Liangtaya Township, which is one of the biggest and most populated township in Myanmar in 2018. For today, I will speak briefly on the various forms of ethnic representation and electoral performance of ethnic parties since 2010, and also give everyone a brief idea of the effects of electoral rules and the impact of political geography on ethnic representation since 2010. So the map that you see on the slide showcases our latest estimate of the dispersion of ethnic groups all around Myanmar, including the various states, administrative states, and regions. So, as most of you all know, since the 2008 constitution was drafted, there have been 3 forms of ethnic representation in Myanmar. There's no formal ethnic quota, but there's some form of informal guaranteed ethnic representation at the cabinet level, at the legislature, and also at the subnational level. So for example, at the 2015 cabinet, we have about 3 ethnic minorities right now sitting in the executive. They're from the Arakanese, Mon, and Shan. There's also a new Ministry of Ethnic Affairs that have been created since 2016, led by a Mon leader, pictured here. However, we still do not know the full scope and power of these ethnic affairs ministry. And for the 2015 legislature at the lower house, as you can see from table 1 here, the percentage of ethnic vote shares have declined in the last 2 elections. So while the number of ethnic parties that contested has increased or nearly doubled from 24 to 55, the number of ethnic parties which have won seats actually declined. The percentage actually declined from 54% to only merely 18%. And the percentage of elected seats won has dropped to now 11% in the legislature. Okay, so thus far, the top ethnic parties are the Arakanese National Party and the Shan National League Democracy with 12 seats each. And then at the subnational level, as you know, since 2008, there have been a creation of 6 self-administered areas, as you can see from all the yellow marked areas here, from 1 to 6. And these are supposedly given some form of autonomy, but yet it is unclear how much autonomy they do have over their own jurisdiction. And so lots of unclear areas, and the ethnic groups there continue to fight for more rights in these areas. And since then, there have also been a creation of 29 ethnic constituency with either an appointment or election of ethnic affairs minister at the regional and state level parliament, local government. So a little bit more on the recent trends. As some of you all know, there's been a growing mass disaffection towards the National League of Democracy in recent years, largely due to disaffection with NLD's misgovernance or slow responses towards addressing ethnic issues. And there's been a resurgence of calls for electoral reform to change from the first past the post electoral system to a more proportional system that they argue might be more beneficial for ethnic representation or ethnic parties. And there's also been a trend of ethnic party mergers, which I'm going to talk a bit more in this presentation. So does Myanmar's first past the post electoral system actually disadvantage ethnic parties? So the research that I've done with Cassandra shows that it's not necessarily true, because electoral disproportionality for Myanmar's electoral system is still pretty low compared to the region, and our studies and our calculations based on their vote shares in 2010 and 2015 elections, as you can see from the table. You may not be able to see right now, but you'll be able to see from our article, is that the FPTP system still does a decent job translating votes to seat shares, and ethnic minority parties still are not so badly disadvantaged. In fact, some ethnic parties, as we show in our paper, benefited by getting more bonus seats. And malapportionment, as we know, malapportionment is a big issue in Burma, and Kai is going to talk a bit more later in the next presentation, so I'm not going to elaborate too much, but the key takeaway here is that malapportionment is really high in Myanmar, which means that there's a big variety of number of voters in each constituency. So there's no equal share in terms of the translation of vote to seat shares. So the deviation to the electoral quota is especially high in ethnic concentrated states like Kaya, Chin, Kachin, and Shan. So what are the implications of ethnic party mergers for the upcoming general elections? So this is a map that my co-author and I have created. As you can see, the trend so far is that Kachin state, 3 out of 7 parties have merged. And in Chin state, 3 parties have merged, and they are doing well. Rakhine did well last general election. There were 2 party mergers, which explain why they did very well in 2015, but unfortunately, the merger has split in 2017. And in Mon state, we have 3 party mergers too. And Kayin, there have been 4 party mergers. A key feature of these party mergers is that they are all parties, ethnic parties of the same ethnic groups, and they are merging together. We have not seen any party mergers of ethnicity or cross-ethnic party mergers. So that may be a problem for cross-party appeals. So the key findings, just to summarize, given that we are only given 10 minutes to present, is that first past the post system does not really give big parties too much advantage in Myanmar. Small ethnic parties can still enjoy or did enjoy higher bonus seat shares. And the trend towards ethnic party merger has helped to reduce wasted votes, improve brand name, and our prediction and our study in our paper shows that some ethnic parties can still do very well in ethnically concentrated location. So political geography matters a lot. So even you have highly malproportioned, underpopulated constituencies, we try to do that and simulate by predicting. We find that in places such as Kaya, Chin, and Kachin, if you have large concentration or small concentration of same ethnic group voters in one area, the ethnic parties may still do well even though they are small. However, unfortunately or fortunately, not all ethnic groups are geographically concentrated that benefit them. As you can see from this table, Chin, Kachin, Shan, in Chin itself, there are 53 different ethnic groups. And in Shan, there are more than 33 different ethnic groups spread along the east side of Myanmar. So this this will be a problem, which means that their ethnic voters are all kind of dispersed. And ethnic parties may not be able to strategically lobby their voters. So what's the key implication of all this? The key implication is that ethnic party mergers between parties is a good trend for ethnic parties. However, this is insufficient. We still need ethnic parties to coordinate to prevent split votes, to work beyond one ethnic issue, but to appeal across groups. Finally, in the 2015 general election, we have also learned that ethnic voters are not always ethnic voters, which means they do not always just vote for their own ethnic party or their own ethnic candidate, but they are also strategic voters who want programmatic parties and want policies like economic policies and policies that promote peace and security in their region. So that's all for today, and I welcome your questions later. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to you, Kai.
Thank you, Natina. Let me quickly share as well, and then I'll take off from.
Do you have control right now?
I'm not sure I do.
Okay, hang on. How do you do that? Okay. Do you have it right now?
I think so.
Okay, good.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Then let me join Edgar and Natina in saying good morning to everyone, regardless of where in the world you are. Vancouver early, Ottawa mid-morning, or my co-author for this paper, Constant Courtine, is in France late afternoon. Thank you, Edgar, for putting this together and everyone for giving their time to this important series of presentations and discussions. I'd like to say thanks, first of all, to IDRC for enabling all of this work. We've had, I think, 3 very productive years of collaboration with the Yangon University of Economics that has produced 3 very good summer programs and a series of other capacity building sessions and initiatives in Myanmar, and has also enabled some side research like this particular project that I'm going to share on this thing called Malapportionment. It's a key feature to Myanmar's electoral system. I don't, I'll say right away, have an answer to whether this upcoming election in November 2020 is going to produce a more inclusive parliament. And I would suggest to everybody that after the performance of political scientists over the last couple of years on key elections like Trump and Brexit and Australia and any number of other ones, that you don't take too seriously any political scientist prediction on an election. The track record just doesn't warrant it. But what I'm going to suggest is that thinking about this particular feature, called again Malapportionment of Myanmar, does prompt us to rethink some of the assumptions we have about how Myanmar operates, right? Let me just say quickly, you are all probably basically familiar with elections in Myanmar. There was a brief democratic era following independence from 1948 until 1962, then a long period of authoritarian rule under military dictatorship for the most part, until a partial reopening which began in 2011. We had the first general elections in 2010, although these were problematic in many ways. More open and partially free and fair general elections in 2015 that everyone knows produced a decisive victory for the NLD. Although, as I and a number of other people have argued, we really should think about the Myanmar system not as a democratic one, but as a hybrid rule of sorts that has an ongoing power-sharing arrangement between the civilian government led by the NLD and the military, which retains extensive control over the state due to the 2008 constitution. Myanmar uses first-past-the-post electoral rules for both its upper and lower house. The president is selected by a complex formula that's based on the number of seats in the upper and lower house in part. So this is a system that's familiar to everyone in Canada, Westminster-based. What is really unique about the Myanmar case, and which produces the malapportionment that I'll be talking about, is that electoral boundaries, the districts, right, the ridings in the Canadian context, are based on colonial era administrative units. And these have some very unique features that distinguish them from the typical Westminster electoral district. I think the key feature of Myanmar that I want to highlight, that many other researchers have discussed and that I want to problematize a bit through this presentation, is the notion that that Myanmar politics have been historically dominated by the ethnic majority Buddhist Bamar. I don't want to contest that they have been dominated by the Buddhist Bamar, but I do want to, through malapportionment, challenge the notion that the political system more broadly is substantially stacked in favor of the Bamar. And that'll be clear in a few moments. So let's begin quickly with this thing called malapportionment. I'll be quick here, but I hope this makes sense. Apportionment very simply concerns the number of voters per district, right? So let's imagine we have two districts here. In other words, two ridings in the Canadian context, District A and District B. In this case, each one of these districts has 10 voters. That means they're equally apportioned, right? Same number of voters in District A, same number of voters in District B. In a first-past-the-post system, both of these districts would elect one MP each. So in essence, if we want to put it this way, one vote is approximately 1/10 of what it takes to elect an MP, and each MP in this case represents 10 voters. Malapportionment arises when districts have different numbers of voters to each other. So let's say we think of two districts again, A and B, but in this case, District A has 10 voters, District B has only 1 voter, right? What does that mean in practice? In a first-past-the-post system, it means that both of these districts will still elect one MP, but in essence, the one voter from District B, their vote is worth about 10 times as much as the votes from District A, right? Because there are 1/10 as many voters in that district. And this has, of course, all kinds of implications. If we begin with the normative implication, it violates what I think many would recognize as a fundamental premise of electoral democracy, and that is that one person should have one vote, right? And that vote should be roughly equal. Again, in this case, the vote from District B is worth approximately 10 times as much as a vote from District A, right? So it violates the one person, one vote normative principle. But maybe more importantly, in practice, political science research has associated malapportionment with all kinds of important distortions, right? What we find when we look at countries that have some degree of malapportionment is that there is a lot of bias towards districts that have fewer voters, that are overweighted, in this case, District B, right? So if you're going to, for example, distribute electoral goodies to buy votes or to persuade voters to vote for your party, obviously B is a more appealing target because you don't have to distribute anywhere near as much in District B as you do A. So we have implications for vote buying, for monetary politics generally. We have implications for representation. In general, in malapportioned systems, the orientation tends to be towards overrepresented districts like District B here. Right? Okay, so now that we've established the normative and some of the practical implications of malapportionment generally, let's turn back to malapportionment in Myanmar. Now remember, we said that the districts in Myanmar are based on these colonial era administrative boundaries, and those are very, very disproportionate in size. So if we start simply with extremes, the smallest electoral district in the lower house in Myanmar has 1,408 voters. the largest electoral district has 454,307 voters. Okay, so if we go back to this example here, where we had a difference of 10-1, in Myanmar, that difference between extremes is 322-1. In other words, one vote in the smallest district is approximately equal to 322 votes in the largest district. This is a massive, massive discrepancy. If we look at historically, the next largest discrepancy of any quasi-democratic election or democratic election in modern history, that's India in 2008 or 9, I believe, and the ratio is about 1-90, right? So Myanmar is more than 3 times as large as the next largest. We're looking here at the figure that is a graphing of a common measure of malapportionment called MAL. It's a complex formula that we don't need to worry about. But again, this demonstrates here larger value is greater malapportionment, that malapportionment in Myanmar is significantly higher than any other Asian comparator. And this has all kinds of implications as we just talked about. Right. So when we look at the patterns of variation in district size and try to focus on overrepresented districts, we see a general pattern emerging from the figures here. On the x-axis, we have the number of voters per district. On the y-axis, we have a range of different categories. These boxes here represent the distribution of electoral district sizes for each of the categories. The line in the middle is the median, and these are the interquartile districts. Doesn't matter. The main takeaway here is that the electoral districts in states, for example, are substantially smaller. The median district is somewhere around 70,000, whereas the median district in the regions, which is where ethnic groups are concentrated, which is where majority Bamar are concentrated, are substantially larger at about 120,000, right? So what we're immediately seeing from this, and the next category really underscores that, districts that are Bamar majority are substantially larger on average than districts that are Bamar minority, right? By a factor of almost 2-1. Again, a median of around 50,000 for Bamar minority districts to a median of over 120,000 for Bamar majority districts. So this tells us that Bamar minority districts, again, ethnic majority districts, are overrepresented relative to their Bamar majority counterparts. Rural districts are substantially overrepresented. And importantly, when we look at ethnic parties, districts where the military-backed USDP wins, the civilian NLD wins, or where ethnic party wins, we also see a big discrepancy. The districts where the USDP, again, the military-backed USDP wins, or where ethnic parties win, are significantly smaller on average than our NLD districts. Right? So what are the implications of this? Interestingly enough, despite malapportionment being extreme in the Myanmar case, the general lack of experience with elections and contesting elections in Myanmar means that most of the political parties in Myanmar haven't tried to leverage this to their advantage so far. In fact, the only party that does seem to have tried to benefit strategically from malapportionment is the military-backed USDP, which evidence suggests ran in smaller districts, strategically targeted smaller districts. The NLD hasn't done this so far. So as a consequence, a lot of the distortions we associate with malapportionment haven't actually manifested in Myanmar yet. But what we anticipate, and in fact are essentially sure will happen, is that as parties in Myanmar become more sophisticated in their electoral strategies and begin to leverage the features of the electoral system, they will target smaller districts, and we'll see the whole range of distortions associated with malapportionment begin to appear. Right? A second important implication of this, and this is one that I think is critical for dialogue with ethnic minority groups, is that a shift to proportional representation, which is advocated by a lot of minority groups, may actually be counterproductive for their interests. And the simple reason for this is that if we see a shift to proportional representation away from first past the post, the overrepresentation of minority districts is likely to be negated. In other words, districts will be more equally apportioned, and essentially the bonus, if you will, that minority groups get under the current first past the post system because of the electoral boundaries will disappear, right? So even if there are some tangential benefits for minority representation through proportional representation rules, undoing the malapportionment that is currently so pronounced in Myanmar will counter those and may actually lead to less representation for minority groups. Third, as all of you know, Myanmar has had substantial ethnic tensions. A lot of these have been characterized as center against periphery. We've had groups like Bamata, that have agitated the ethnic majority, Bamar Buddhist ethnic majority, through a narrative that the Buddhist majority cultures and worldviews are under threat from Muslims and to some extent other minorities. There's a real risk that malapportion could agitate these tensions in the sense that the realization that a vote from an ethnic minority area is about twice or more as powerful as a vote from the ethnic majority areas fits that narrative quite well, right? We haven't seen any groups pick up on this, but there is a risk of that happening. And I'd say lastly, the biggest takeaway potentially is that while politics in Myanmar certainly are dominated by the ethnic majority Bamar, and I think will continue to be dominated by the ethnic majority Bamar for the foreseeable future, we should question the notion that the political system more broadly is fundamentally stacked in favor of the Bamar, or at least is as stacked in favor of the Bamar as we think it is, right? Malapportionment, again, is a really important feature of electoral politics. And in the case of Myanmar, the way voters are distributed across districts, we see that non-Bamar areas have substantial overrepresentation and in some respects more powerful votes than their counterparts in ethnic Bamar areas, right? If we do see continued consolidation of ethnic minority parties like Natina was referring to, we could see presumably a meaningful shift towards non-Bamar political representation. Right. I'll end it at that so that I don't go too much more over time, and I think we will shift to questions, but I'll pass it over to Edgar for moderating.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that you have been under pressure to produce these two presentations a very short period of time, but you have given a lot of highlights and really well-rounded thoughts for people to elaborate. We have a few questions. Some